Daniel and Lisa Murdock were the couple everyone in Oakridge admired devoted. Parents, friendly neighbors, the very image of small-town stability until one ordinary Tuesday unraveled their perfect life and set in motion a disappearance so chilling it still haunts investigators today. The Murdock family lived on a quiet cul-de-sac where every house looked nearly identical, but theirs always seemed to stand out for all the right reasons. The lawn was perfectly trimmed, the flower beds neat and colorful, and a warm porch light glowed every evening as if welcoming anyone who passed by. Daniel Murdock was known as the reliable father who waved to neighbors while carrying groceries or watering the garden. He worked as a mid-level accountant at a regional firm, a steady job that kept food on the table and allowed his family small luxuries like weekend barbecues or the occasional trip to the local amusement park. His wife, Lisa, ran a small bakery in town that was beloved for its fresh bread and cinnamon rolls. Together they raised two young children, Sophie and Ben, who filled the house with laughter and the kind of chaos that made the Murdocks seem like the very picture of suburban happiness. From the outside, their lives looked like something out of a cozy magazine spread. Every Sunday morning, Daniel would take the kids for a bike ride while Lisa prepared a late breakfast. The neighbors often heard the sound of music drifting from the kitchen or spotted the family loading into their car for a picnic at the park. Even their dog, a gentle golden retriever named Max, added to the image of a wholesome, loving household. People in Oakridge often remarked that the Murdocks seemed to have figured life out, striking a perfect balance between work, family, and community. To anyone watching from the sidewalk, they had no reason to worry about anything at all. But beneath the tidy lawn and cheerful greetings, subtle cracks had already begun to form. Daniel spent long evenings in his home office, claiming he needed to finish paperwork, though Lisa sometimes wondered why an accountant needed so many late nights when tax season was months away. She would pass by the closed door and hear only silence, no clacking of keys or rustle of papers. Sometimes he emerged with a distracted look, eyes lingering on the framed family photographs that lined the hallway as if they carried a weight only he could feel. He still smiled when the children ran to greet him, but there was a hesitation behind it, a flicker of thought he quickly tried to hide. The neighbors, absorbed in their own routines, noticed little. They saw Daniel carrying his briefcase each morning and assumed everything was as normal as ever. If anyone spotted the faint shadows under his eyes or the way he sometimes stared into the distance while waiting for his car to warm up, they chalked it up to stress from work. After all, who among them hadn't had a rough week? The Murdocks seemed too stable, too grounded, for anyone to imagine trouble brewing behind their closed doors. Yet even then late at night, when the lights in the other houses were off and the street fell silent, a faint tension lingered inside the Murdock home as if the walls themselves sensed a storm that no one else could see coming. It began with a quiet phone call on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning. Daniel sat at his desk in the office break room when his supervisor summoned him to a private meeting. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes, but by the time he stepped back into the hallway, his career of nearly a decade was over. The company was downsizing, they said budgets were tight, positions were being eliminated, and unfortunately his name was on the list. There was no warning, no time to prepare. He was handed a thin envelope containing a severance package and a polite letter of thanks for his years of service. As he drove home that day, the crisp winter air outside the car felt heavier than ever. He kept his hands tight on the steering wheel and told himself it was only a temporary setback, something he could fix before anyone noticed. Instead of sharing the news with Lisa, he parked his car in the driveway at the usual time and walked into the house as if nothing had changed. He kissed his children, asked about their day, and ate dinner while his mind raced with calculations. The next morning, he put on his suit, grabbed his briefcase, and left the house as if heading to work. In reality, he drove aimlessly for hours, stopping at coffee shops and library parking lots to browse job listings on his phone. At first, he was optimistic. His resume was strong, his record clean, and he believed another firm would be eager to hire him. But days turned into weeks, and every application went unanswered. Each rejection email tightened the knot in his stomach. Bills continued to arrive like clockwork. Mortgage payments, utility statements, school expenses, all of them stacking higher as the severance check dwindled. Lisa occasionally asked about their finances, but Daniel reassured her with a practiced calm. He claimed he was working overtime on special projects, which explained the late hours and sudden mood swings. In truth, he had begun withdrawing small amounts of money from their savings account, careful not to trigger suspicion. At first, it was just to cover groceries and utilities, but as the pressure mounted, the withdrawals grew larger. He started frequenting a small casino on the edge of town, convincing himself that one lucky night could solve everything. The flashing lights and constant noise drowned out his fears, and for a brief time he felt in control again. Yet every bet only deepened the hole he was digging. Sleep became difficult. He would lie awake long after Lisa had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling as his thoughts spiraled. What if she discovered the truth? What would the children think of him? He began waking before dawn, pacing the kitchen in silence, his mind chasing solutions that never came. The man who once prided himself on steady, practical thinking now felt trapped in a maze with no exit. To the outside world, he remained the same friendly neighbor who waved in the driveway each morning, but inside, Daniel was drowning in a secret he could no longer control, a secret that was tightening around him with each passing day. Lisa's discovery came one chilly afternoon when she went searching for a roll of tape in Daniel's desk drawer. Beneath a pile of unopened mail, she found a single sheet of paper that made her stomach drop. It was a foreclosure notice, stamped with a bold red date only a few weeks away. For a long moment she stood frozen, reading and rereading the words, trying to make sense of them. Their mortgage was overdue, the bank was threatening legal action, and the numbers didn't add up to the story Daniel had been telling her. When he returned home that evening, she held the letter behind her back and asked a careful question about the bills. Daniel's answer was smooth but evasive, a quick reassurance that everything was under control, that there had been a simple clerical error. He smiled the same calm smile he used on neighbors and strangers alike, but his eyes darted toward the drawer as if measuring the damage. From that day on, the rhythm of the household began to change. Lisa tried to believe him, but doubt crept into every corner of her thoughts. She noticed he spent more time locking doors, even inside the house. The basement door that once swung freely now clicked shut with a key that only he seemed to have. His schedule grew stranger, too. He left earlier in the mornings and came home later at night, sometimes after the children were already asleep. On weekends, he claimed to be running errands or meeting old colleagues about new job leads, yet he returned smelling faintly of cigarette smoke and cheap cologne, scents that had no place in their quiet suburban world. Neighbors began to sense something was off, though no one said anything aloud. Mrs. Callahan across the street mentioned to another neighbor that Daniel looked thinner, his face more drawn, like a man who had not slept in days. The mail carrier noticed the stack of unopened envelopes growing inside the mailbox. At night, a few residents reported hearing odd sounds from the Murdock house, furniture scraping across the floor, heavy footsteps pacing back and forth well past midnight. One night, a teenager walking his dog swore he saw Daniel in the backyard digging a narrow trench under the glow of a single flashlight. By morning, the lawn appeared untouched, as if nothing had happened. Inside the home, tension thickened like humidity before a storm. Lisa's attempts to confront him ended in quiet deflections. He always promised explanations that never arrived, brushing off her concerns with vague talk of surprise plans and big opportunities. Even the children sensed something was wrong. Sophie began having nightmares, and Ben asked why their father stared at the family photos for so long without saying a word. The cheerful hum of their once happy household gave way to uneasy silence, broken only by the creak of floorboards and the occasional low murmur of Daniel talking to himself behind a closed door. Whatever secret he was keeping had grown beyond a private burden. It now loomed over the entire family like a shadow that no amount of sunlight could chase away. The night everything changed began with a slow, heavy rain that turned the streets of Oakridge slick and silent. By dusk, the neighborhood was wrapped in a damp stillness, the kind that makes every sound feel sharper. From the outside, the Murdock house looked as it always had, its porch light glowing softly against the dark sky. Inside, however, the rooms were strangely quiet. Lisa's bakery had closed early because of the storm, but she never sent her usual text to the staff confirming the next morning's schedule. The children, who typically spent the evening laughing over board games or squabbling about bedtime, made no noise at all. Curtains were drawn tight across every window, hiding whatever might have been unfolding within. The next morning, subtle signs of trouble began to ripple through the neighborhood. Lisa's shop remained closed, a handwritten "Back Tomorrow" sign still taped to the door long after opening hours. Sophie and Ben didn't show up for school, and no one answered the phone when teachers called. At first, neighbors assumed the family was dealing with a mild illness or a small emergency, but as the day wore on, unease spread. By mid-afternoon, Mrs. Callahan noticed that the mailbox was still stuffed with yesterday's deliveries and that Daniel's car was absent from the driveway. She tried knocking on the door but heard nothing, not even the bark of Max, the usually friendly retriever who always greeted visitors. By early evening, concern had turned into alarm. One neighbor phoned the local police department to request a welfare check. Two officers arrived just as the rain began again, their patrol car headlights sweeping across the damp lawn. They circled the house, knocking on doors and calling out names. No one responded. The windows were locked, the curtains closed, and the air around the house felt unnervingly still. Eventually, the officers forced open the back door, stepping into a home that seemed frozen in time. The kitchen table was set for dinner, plates half arranged as though a meal had been interrupted. A faint metallic smell lingered in the air, sharp enough to raise the hair on their arms. Room by room, the officers searched. Upstairs bedrooms showed no sign of struggle. Beds were neatly made, toys arranged as if waiting for children who might return at any moment. But the basement door was locked from the inside, and it took several hard kicks to break it open. When the door finally gave way, the beam of a flashlight revealed a scene that would haunt investigators for years. On the cold concrete floor lay Lisa, Sophie, Ben, and even Max, each carefully placed on sleeping bags, their faces pale and lifeless. Beside them rested a wallet, a set of car keys, and a simple wedding band. There was no note, no explanation, and no sign of Daniel. His absence was as loud as any scream, a single missing piece in a puzzle that felt deliberately incomplete. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing over the quiet house as if trying to erase the night's unspeakable events. In the days that followed the grisly discovery, Oakridge was consumed by a mix of grief, shock, and relentless speculation. The once sleepy town, where the biggest news usually involved school sports scores or news shops on Main Street, became the center of a nationwide media frenzy. News vans lined the cul-de-sac, their satellite dishes pointed toward the gray autumn sky as reporters repeated the same haunting phrase, "The father was missing." Police set up barricades, keeping curious onlookers at a distance while forensic teams combed the property for clues. Inside the house, every surface was photographed, every inch of carpet tested for fibers, every drawer opened in search of a note or hidden message. But there was nothing, no fingerprints out of place, no signs of forced entry, and no indication of where Daniel had gone. Investigators quickly pieced together a financial trail that revealed the secret life Daniel had been living for months. Bank statements showed repeated large withdrawals from the family savings account, many of which ended at a nearby casino known for high-stakes poker games. Security footage captured him entering the casino on multiple occasions, always alone, sometimes staying until dawn. In a rented storage unit on the outskirts of town, detectives found a collection of troubling items, forged identification documents, travel brochures for countries without extradition agreements, and a small stack of unmarked cash. It was as if he had been preparing for a second life, carefully plotting an escape while his family continued their daily routines, unaware of the storm closing in around them. Despite the damning evidence of planning, Daniel himself remained a ghost. Traffic cameras caught his sedan leaving Oakridge the night of the deaths, heading north along a rural highway, but the trail ended abruptly at a toll booth where he paid in cash. No witnesses could describe where he went next. Police expanded their search to airports, bus stations, and train depots, but every lead turned cold within hours. Some investigators believed he fled the country using one of the fake passports. Others suspected he might have taken his own life in a remote area, leaving no body to be found. Years passed, and the story faded from national headlines, but Oakridge never forgot. The house where the tragedy unfolded was eventually sold, though not without difficulty. New owners reported strange occurrences, lights flickering without explanation, doors creaking open in the middle of the night, the faint sound of footsteps on the basement stairs. Whether these events were real or the product of a community's collective unease, no one could say for sure. Occasionally, tips still trickled into the local police department, sightings of a man resembling Daniel in small towns, whispers of a drifter who matched his description, working odd jobs under false names. None of these leads were ever confirmed. To this day, the fate of Daniel Murdock remains one of Oakridge's darkest mysteries. The unanswered questions linger like a chill in the air. Was he a desperate man who escaped to start anew, or was he hiding much closer than anyone dared imagine? Each theory carries its own quiet terror, a reminder that even the most ordinary lives can conceal the most extraordinary secrets.